Welcome, everyone. It's my privilege to welcome you to the CEO Breakfast and Strategy Series hosted by the Schneider School of Business and Economics right here at St. Norbert College. I'm Brian Brees, the president of St. Norbert College, and it is indeed my privilege to welcome you here today. Thank you for joining us. This marks the 22nd year of the CEO Breakfast Strategy Series, and by my count, we'll have hosted over 170 of the region's business leaders by the end of this year's programming. That's a remarkable amount of creativity, talent, and brain power assembled in a single forum, and we're proud to have been sponsoring this series for over 2 decades. This is the second year that the series has been held under the auspices of the Schneider School of Business and Economics. The mission of the Schneider School is, in part, to serve as the hub for business intelligence in Northeast Wisconsin, and this breakfast series fits perfectly into that purpose. Adding to the world-class programming we offer our undergraduates and our graduate students, the services provided by our Center for Exceptional Leadership, the Center for Business and Economic Analysis, and the Strategic Research Institute. And I'm pleased that you're all here today to help keep this important conversation going about how best to drive the economic success of this region that we care so much about. The CEO Breakfast Series provides area executives with the opportunity to hear from some of our top CEOs in the state. This resource is brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor, Myron Construction. Title sponsor, Johnson Financial Group, Davis Keelthau Attorneys at Law, and Insight Publication. And today's session sponsor is Bank First. Could you please give these sponsors a warm round of applause for their generosity? It is now my great privilege to introduce Father Anu Akpa, who will begin the morning with prayer. Father?
It is an honor to be invited. So I don't take this for granted. I'm very grateful. I want to begin our prayer with a reading from the Bible, as we always do. And I'm taking this from the first letter of John, chapter 5, verses 14 to 15. And this is from the Voice translation, so it's a different language. We live in the bold confidence that God hears our voices when we ask for things that fit God's plan. And if we have no doubt that He hears our voices, we can be assured that God moves in response to our call. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks that we are again permitted to gather in this fellowship. May our friendship be strengthened and our lives be broadened. Thank you for the efforts of all who make this happen. Be God in all things, in the wine and the food and the tea and the coffee. Be God in the conversations that we share. Please point us to what we can do to create a better humanity, a better world, a better college, a better Green Bay area. And we make our prayers through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Well, it's sure my privilege to introduce our speaker, Craig Dickman. He's so talented and so smart and has so much to offer that this is his second time at the CEO Breakfast Series. But Craig is now the managing director of TitletownTech. As most of you know, a venture partnership formed by the Green Bay Packers and Microsoft, designed to enable and invest in early stage businesses through the Innovation Lab, the Venture Studio, and the Venture Fund. Craig has also founded Breakthrough Fuel, the industry leader in transportation energy management, and led the company for its first 15 years before exiting the business in 2019. A passion for innovation and entrepreneurship is a common thread throughout his career. and enthusiasm for thoughtful transformation is present in the projects he pursues and how he carries himself. He's an inventor, holding multiple patents for energy management, and he helps support inventive ideas in others and in the community. He was a co-founder of the New Venture Foundry, a venture partnership that works with entrepreneurs and corporate innovators to solve business problems and create new ventures. This partnership has supported the launch and funding of 6 new businesses. You'll also note, if you haven't seen from our friends Inside Publications, iTech, he's involved in a lot of different things. A wonderful story in here related to safety and modern medicine. Pick that up and take a look at it. Craig is a fixture in the community, giving to it consistently, in part because he's a Wisconsin native. He grew up in Green Bay, received and earned his Bachelor of Science degree in business from the University of Wisconsin Green Bay, and his Master's in Business Administration from the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. Ladies and gentlemen, Craig Dickman.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Good morning. It is really great to be back at St. Norbert College, and I've always loved the experience that I've had here from the Schneider School of Business and Economics. They're doing great things with the Center of Exceptional Leadership and so many other things in the community. So thank you, Brian. Delightful to be back here. I was sharing with a couple of folks getting started that this is like having a conversation with friends. I think I know about half the people in the room, so thank you so much for coming out to hear me talk about designing a collaborative innovation process within an entrepreneurial ecosystem, which I am proud to say among my friends has been recognized as the worst title in a SNC breakfast ever. I mean, seriously, who comes up with this stuff? And to make matters worse, I work in the startup community, and as you know, things change and pivot quickly. So I don't even want to give this presentation anymore. So, the idea of collaborative innovation is frankly last decade. So we're not going to talk about collaborative innovation. We are now, and welcome to the roaring 20s. We're in a time when business and activity is changing so quickly that instead of talking about collaborative innovation, what I want to do is kind of introduce this concept that we have now that we call convergent innovation. So very, very different, because if you think about the way innovation is taking place, and if you think of the way the market is moving, as you look out in the horizon, there's a lot going on. Technology's changing, markets are moving. It is like catching lightning sometimes, trying to find out how to get your business in the right place at the right time and create new value. Because in some ways, everything's changing. And so that's where I really want to start with is a few thoughts on innovation. First, we're going through a time where it really is the acceleration of acceleration. Everything's moving fast. Then this decade will see greater change than we've seen in the last 20 or 30 years, greater wealth created in this decade than we've seen in the last 100 years. We're seeing technologies, whether it's machine learning, artificial intelligence, blockchain, all the buzzwords, autonomous vehicles, are moving from buzzwords to reality. I mean, I remember when an autonomous vehicle meant you had enough money to hire a chauffeur. And by the end of this decade, most of us are going to be driving around in vehicles that we may not have to drive in. And I see it every day at TitletownTech. It's amazing to think. We kind of opened in July of last year. In 6 months, we saw 559 companies looking to bring new value into the marketplace. I looked last night, in January, 81, over 4 companies a day. So one of the things I can tell you almost certainly is if you think about your business, there is right now someone, somewhere, probably in this area, looking how to disrupt it, looking how to replace you, looking how to create the next level of value, and they're moving fast. And so you really need to think about what this means to your business, because everything is accelerating. Now, the good thing is People inside and outside organizations see problems. They see things that customers are asking for that you can't deliver yet. You're seeing opportunities in the marketplace where you're saying, if only I could do this then. And what you need to do is recognize that each one of those problems become opportunities for you to do something fundamentally different to create value. At TitletownTech, we call this need-based innovation. We don't focus on discovery-based, trying to figure out, create something new and then figure out what to do with it, but simply figure out what are the problems that exist in the market? What can people do? Because the opportunities are really significant. People in your organizations are seeing it. Entrepreneurs are seeing it. Now, one of the struggles, though, is that most organizations don't have the resources and the culture to pull it off. Bless you. What's interesting is it's easier to create a new business and new value in a garage without resources than it is today in a company with resources, which is really remarkable. In some ways, I think if you're an organization, your greatest competitive advantage is going to become your ability to unlearn. Because you have to do that before you can figure out what to do next. New organizations don't have to worry about that. In some ways, that's why Breakthrough was so interesting. We started with all people who hadn't been in business before. They had nothing to unlearn. And they were able to disrupt an industry. So it's remarkable when you think of all the training programs that are taking place to think that your greatest ability may not be to learn, but to unlearn. It's a very interesting environment that we're coming in. It's kind of a disruptive, disorienting marketplace, but it's wonderful. So you may be asking yourself right now, how do I do this? How does my organization innovate in this market that's moving fast, that's changing, that's creating new opportunities? And I believe that you're asking fundamentally the wrong question. The question that you need to ask yourself is, who is best positioned to solve this problem with me? It's not how, it's who. And so let's just kind of diagram, give you a few thoughts on how we think this and how we think this concept of convergent innovation works. As we said, the start is almost always with a problem, with an opportunity, or with an idea. It's starting somewhere. And I'm sure each one of you can spend a couple of seconds in your head and think of a problem that you'd love to be solved. And then you think, okay, where do I take that? I'm going to create some sort of target, and that target is creating new value, a new service, a new venture. In fact, at TitletownTech, part of what we're really focused on is working with organizations that want to spin out and create new ventures. So, but if you're inside an organization, in fact, that's one point that I wanted to make as well. So many people think that the focus of TitletownTech is to work only with entrepreneurs. And let me share, we love entrepreneurs, and we want to work with them, and we want to work with them often. But the other part of TitletownTech is really designed to work with organizations to help kind of bring some of the innovation process, understand some of these digital technologies and digital transformations. Because at the end of the day, if we have a great entrepreneurial environment, and yet our companies that employ most people, create most value, invest in our non-for-profits, and all the things that take place aren't healthy, we as a region are going to struggle. So I think we all have a mission to make sure that the entrepreneurial ecosystem is healthy and that our business community is healthy as well. So we're going to focus on this from a business standpoint for a minute. And so what happens so often in organizations is you have this idea and you say, okay, I'm going to put a few people together and I'm going to start. And I intentionally have deep space here because let me share the distance between the idea and the target is a lot of space. And it takes work to get there. And so many you start, and how many initiatives can you think about where somebody started and then you just stopped for whatever reason? Or how many times can you think of in your organizations you've started, wandered all over the place, and then just fallen off the map and probably forgot what your target even was? Or when you went all in and simply missed the target? Maybe because you didn't know what you were shooting for, but probably not. Probably because it's a moving target. And moving targets are tough to hit. And so that's where you start introducing a concept of, okay, who can help me solve these problems? So taking a different view, we ask ourselves early, who do we know now that can help us solve this issue, help us define this problem in a way that creates alignment and vision around what to solve? And think of who that is. And also you think about the context. So, we have at TitletownTech kind of a three-stage innovation process where the first one is about purpose. The second part of the process is kind of need-based or solution design, and then it's commercialization. That's one way of focusing on innovation. There's many, many others. The important thing is find the thing that works for you and your business and your culture. But as you're going through, ask yourself, who can help me solve these problems? So usually, absolutely, there's a core group from your organization who are subject matter experts, who know what's going on, who understand the market. But oftentimes that may not be enough. And you might say, to create something new, do I have someone inside the organization that's kind of the venture builder that can help me create something new? And do I bring them in? And oh, by the way, as I mentioned, technology is changing rapidly. And so maybe what we need to do is bring in a technologist, somebody who can help us understand, what does artificial intelligence mean to our industry? How do we think about extended reality, kind of whether it's artificial reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, immersive reality, all the X realities? What does that mean for the customer experience? It was interesting. I was just at a conference that they literally had a digital human who emceed the whole event. And you could talk to it and it would answer you, and they would introduce people, and it created a whole different user experience. So if you think about your customers, how does that start having an impact? Or blockchain, or cryptocurrency, or so many things, autonomous systems. So making sure that when you're working on your design that you've got the people in the room that can really understand where's the opportunity. And then you get to that point in the process where, we are now aligned. We know what we're doing. We know what problem we're going to solve. And then you want to move on to the next one. So you ask yourself, who do we need now to design solutions? Because we have to ultimately build something that can meet the market demand. Oftentimes, again, you've got your core team that continues to build. In this case, we're going to bring the venture builder along with us because, hey, they help with the process. We don't need the technologist anymore, let's say. Let's bring in somebody who can actually develop and build versus just think and understand and be conceptual and move from theory to practice. But you find yourself at each stage along the way asking yourself, who can help us solve these problems? In this case, we're also going to bring in the voice of the customer and say, early on, let's bring in a customer and think about it. And that's one of the things we designed and one of the things we think about at TitletownTech. I think so many, accelerators, incubators, startup programs miss the mark a little bit because what they do is say, we're going to work with an entrepreneur, we're going to work with a startup, we're going to work with a business, and try to get them ready to go out into the venture community and get funding. And if they get funding, that's a measure of success. We think that's a really false measure of success. What we want to do is get in the market, get in front of a customer, see what the customer thinks, see if you're creating value there. Ultimately, it's the market that determines whether something's successful, not a venture capitalist. And so bringing in the voice of a customer. And then what we'll do is we'll continue to move on. Now we've got that, you have to think about how do we commercialize things? It's interesting, at TitletownTech, we're working with two different, I'll give you two different kind of examples of existing organizations who are looking to think about how to take a very good solution and commercialize it. In both cases, they realize they can't do that inside their business. One's looking to disrupt a $1.6 trillion business that they believe has 30% embedded waste, that where they're sitting in the value chain, they can see all of the waste and dysfunction that's taking place and say, if we deploy technology, And if we deploy some of these new emerging technologies into this process, we can totally change the way an industry thinks. But we don't want to do it with our company because we're a little too myopic, and we're going to create too much conflict in the marketplace, and people might stop doing business with us if we're doing something new. So we're going to spin it out and do something new. We've got another one that we're working with where they are looking to disrupt a very well-established industry, been out there for some time, and they realize there's a big gap in that from the people who are creating value, the beginning part, to the customers. In the middle, about 70% of the value is being sucked up by middle people, distributors, folks playing hands-off, because ultimately there's lack of transparency between demand and supply. So they're saying, how can we use technology to blow that up, kind of unlock the power of the marketplace? And they're doing the same thing. They built a little prototype inside their company, now they're spinning it out. And they're going to create something new. So you really have to think about what are the implications of commercializing and who do you bring along? So we ask ourselves, who do we need to launch a new venture? And in this case, you're going to continue to bring some team, and your team may change. And then it's a whole different group of people that may make sense. You're going to need attorneys, so I gave them a wig. You need a venture lead, somebody who's going to run with it, other people to commercialize it. But you realize that because so much is happening so fast, that it requires other resources. And then if you hit the target, it all comes to when you're trying to launch and you get your business ready, you find the time that the market's ready, you launch and you create something new in the marketplace and create fundamentally new value. And it's how do you align what you know about the business in the marketplace with all the changes happening in the market, society, culture, with those changes taking place in technology, and there's new opportunities come up, and bringing those together. And so we think about that in a convergent innovation side. Now, back to the title. As I said, I didn't like the first half of the title, so I've changed it to Convergent Innovation. It probably doesn't surprise you that this concept of an entrepreneurial ecosystem, I don't like either. It's amazing how many economic development teams are running around the country right now trying to create elegant maps of this conceptual entrepreneurial ecosystem, and nobody really knows what that means. So we're going to change that to simply say it's about creating a convergent innovation process with a who network. You need to know who your who's are. And so, we think about that in terms of thinking about, your network and how you build a network that's going to enable you to be successful and build and grow. What's interesting is some companies have this all within their four walls. I would argue not many, but some do. And if you can look around and see you've got the right who's to help you build, then you can do that within an organization. For many, they go out and create their own network of who's and understand, how can we find partners? How do we find potential customers, vendors, folks in the value chain that we can bring into a collaborative process, convergent process, caught myself, into that process and help them build. So you can do this yourself. If you don't have it within inside your organization and you don't want to build a network, part of what we've done at TitletownTech is focus on building this network of who's, and that's really part of what we've done at TitletownTech is say the real power when you think of the Packers, Microsoft, the 17 partners that we have, the networks we've built within the community, is to create a who network that enables us to figure out who are the right people to solve the right problem at the right time in a really meaningful way. And we're seeing that take place inside TitletownTech every day. Like I said, when you think about 559 companies last year, entrepreneurs or corporations with ideas saying we want to create something. And so what we try to do is figure out how to help this region solve problems, create new value, bring the right who's, have the right process, and try to build. So at the end of the day, we've got a region that truly does dream big, that really wants to innovate together, and that we can all create new value together. And I believe if we're doing that, we're going to find that this region will be as well positioned as anywhere in the country to solve really big, meaningful problems and creating big, meaningful opportunities and creating new wealth and new opportunities for the people that are here. So it's a pretty exciting time. I think this is, without question, the best decade to be in business ever. And so look forward to working with everyone in this decade. Thank you. Questions? Brian said I've got a couple of minutes for questions. If anyone has a question, I would be more than happy to take it. If nobody has a question, I will be happy to run. Any questions? Come on, with all my friends here. Yes, sir.
So you looked at 500 and some companies. What are some of the screens that you use to say if you want to take it to the next step or no, we've finished?
Great question. So the question is, looking at 559 companies, what screens do we use? Well, the first thing I can tell you is anyone preparing Excel spreadsheets is wasting their time because they're totally made up and they don't mean anything. So 30-page business plans don't matter a whole lot. Excel spreadsheets, valuations, don't waste your time. We look at two primary criteria to get started with. One, do we believe it's a good entrepreneur? Do they have within their makeup, values, character, skill set the ability to build and create something? So is it a good entrepreneur? The second thing we look at is it a meaningful market? And if we think it's a good entrepreneur with a meaningful market, we'll take a really hard look at it. And I'll tell you what, the thing that's been probably most surprising to me is how much really interesting things people are working on. Brian had shared, and a plug for Insight and InTech magazines. So this one has a story about Oculogica, two sisters from Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, who've created the first FDA-authorized non-baseline test for concussion. Brain trauma expert. This is solving a big, meaningful problem. When you think of how many undiagnosed concussions there are, and the vast majority of Martin sports, they're in accidents, they're in a car accident, they're in banging your head, people who haven't had baselines. And the risk is if you misdiagnose them, it can be a life-changing event. So things that are meaningful for us, and I think that's our screen. Now I will say I've also been amazed. I even think in the last couple of months, I have seen and met with entrepreneurs who are 3D printing rockets. I mean 100-foot rockets, 3D printed in a couple of weeks, and they can go and change the math so if a flight wasn't quite right, they can make it bigger, smaller, fit a payload, and 3D print it. But that wasn't shocking to me in some ways. The one that surprised me even more was meeting with a woman, and her company is 3D printing lungs. They're taking cells, genetic material from individuals who have COPD, lung cancer, serious problem, and using a method, it's not FDA approved yet, they're developing it. But seeing what people are thinking about, as you think about the things that can be unlocked this decade, it's really remarkable. And so that's what I'd say we look for first, meaningful markets and good entrepreneurs. Other questions? Yes?
Everyone seems to have a different definition for it, so what's your definition of innovation?
What's my definition of innovation? So let me begin by saying what it's not, and then I'll say what it is. I think sometimes people think that innovation is this kind of magical breakthrough, this kind of whiff of genius that creates something new, and every once in a while there is some of that. For me, innovation is really simple. It's creating new value for the marketplace that is not created for itself. So solving a problem for your customers, an example that they can't solve for themselves. Simply creating new value. If you're creating new value, then I think you're innovating. Yes, Karen.
Wisconsin Technology Council does that report. I can't remember the name of it, but
nobody can. That's the problem.
I hear you. But they do it on the amount of activity, you know, based on Act 255 tax credits, they do the,
Yep, yep.
how much activity in the state.
Yep.
And so today, you know, most of, I think northeastern Wisconsin has a 5-10% very small portion. Most of it is clustered in Madison, southeastern Wisconsin,
Yep.
or around the university. So my question is it critical for northeastern Wisconsin that our universities continue their entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Yeah,
Or is it more critical the business community? Because, you know, again, it's all centered in where there is.
Yeah, so doesn't matter, not enough, yes and yes. So let me just explain that for a moment. So the reports fundamentally, the quality of data is so poor, I'd say they're almost useless. There's so much stuff going on, even in this region, that's not reported, but it's not their fault, it's our fault. Because we've got this humbleness that we don't like telling people about all the entrepreneurs we're working with, the inventions we've got, the companies we're working with. So if we're going to get credit for what we're doing, we've got to knock off a little bit of the Midwest humbleness and actually be telling people what we're doing. So again, not the problem of the reporters, our problem, we can fix that. Second, absolutely, you know, our colleges and universities are a critical part of, you know, the overall network of who's, if you will, because we've got people thinking about problems, researching, collaborating in the community, consulting. You know, they see things, they hear from their students. So absolutely critical. And then the last part, and I don't know if this was part of your question or if I'm just making it up anyway, so it doesn't matter, but the last part is absolutely critical for this region. You know, we have to think, we've got to make sure that when people think about Wisconsin, they think about Madison, Milwaukee, Green Bay, and everywhere else. And right now, too often, they think about Madison, Milwaukee, and everywhere else. But, you know, one of the reasons that Titletown exists is because we had some trends that aren't great in this area. You know, our college attainment rate is not what it should be. We've got to do better. We had too many companies being sold and senior people moving out of the area. And what that meant is we're suffering from some thought leadership gaps, but it's organizations and people investing in our community through philanthropy, through organizations like the Greater Green Bay Community Foundation. If we don't build up a strong base, it's not just the business community that gets hurt, it's everything else that goes within the community. So it's critical for us in the community to have that kind of breadth of talent. And that's the last part. You know, part of it is, you know, we've got to give young people, especially folks who have digital skills, a reason to come here and stay here. And too often the perception has been, you know, if I want to do something exceptional, I have to go someplace. I'm always bothered that 75% of private equity money in venture capital is Boston, New York, and Silicon Valley, when we know that 75% of great ideas aren't there, 75% of great people aren't there. But too often we've created this sense that, hey, if you want to do something exceptional, you've got to go where the action is. And what we have to do is say, we want to be where the action is. So if you're young, talented, in college, graduating, that the first place you look is to stay here and build, that this isn't your fallback position. And I think we can do that. Diane.
Craig, you've been obviously very entrepreneurial and very successful in a number of positions as CEO. What's your suggestion of traits for the next CEO of a company? What do you suggest for that up and coming next CEO, their traits? What do they need to have?
Traits for the next CEO. Wow. So I would, you know, it's really fascinating because in some ways, you know, the more you grow in an organization and the more people think you have power and influence, really the less you really have. So people don't realize how little you really control when you're CEO. So you have to focus on the things that are meaningful. You know, culture. So I think both an awareness of people and finding ways to bring out the best in people and letting them do what they can be. And so really focusing on recognizing that every organization is a collection of people, and when we can empower them, when we think about culture and instill the kind of culture you want as a business by setting both example, by communicating, by being out. So it's about people, it's about culture, and then third, it's having a vision for you want to take the business. So taking time to think. One of the things we do such a poor job on, and CEOs are as bad as anyone, probably worse than most, is simply taking time to think. You spend so much time doing stuff that it's hard to sometimes put on the brake, stop, and say, okay, where am I really leading this business? And so take time to invest in yourself, build a vision for the company, make sure that the culture is clear, the organization's purpose is defined, and you're finding people that buy into what you're trying to create. That's my thought on the CEO. Michael, my business professor, Michael Troyer, when I went to UWGB, I didn't know if I was going to go in business or somewhere else. I had an introduction to business class with Dr. Troyer, never looked back, so thank you.
As I said when I first came in, I learned so much from him, my student, and that's when it's working right, I guess. You use the word convergent innovation, and I'm thinking as one piece of that, the marrying of technologies. Is it fair to say that one of our challenges when we're running a business is we've learned the technology, we've gotten very caught up in it, and one of our challenges is now to break away, as you said, from what we think we know, and start looking for other technologies that can be brought in to solve the problems that our technology won't solve.
I think that's a great point. Yes, absolutely. How many people 10 years ago heard in their organizations the term technical debt? I mean, we didn't ever talk about technical debt. And now every company's talking about technical debt, kind of the weight of all the technology they've got that's kind of this old system that they can't change, they can't move, they can't pivot, they can't create because they've got all this kind of old technology. And so some of it is real old technology. Some of it is how people think about it. And you're absolutely right. You have to bring a fresh eye to the technology side and say, so much has changed. We're literally doing things from a technology standpoint that would have been crazy 5 years ago. I mean, from the time that I'll go here to drive to TitletownTech, I can spin up 1,000 processor cores and have incredible processing power for any problem that I want to solve. I can have access to machine learning algorithms. I can be pumping problems in literally before noon and solving something that's new. And yet people have a problem getting data out of their core systems to understand the information that they need to run their business. It's crazy. And you're exactly right. So it is thinking about how to transform your organization to understand the technologies that are available to you and make sure that you're using them wisely to advance what you're trying to do in the marketplace. One more, or are we done? One more. Brian gave me one more in the hook. Yes.
I just want to say, just an observation, that I think that emoji of you is adorable.
I couldn't resist. I realized incredibly stupid, but I just couldn't.
This one makes me hug you.
I couldn't resist it. That's really the purpose. So with that, thank you so much. This has been a blast.
Craig, on behalf of the entire gathering here, I want to thank you for being a divergent who and helping the region become more meaningful, more relevant, and to become a place, a destiny for the young talent and the senior talent to be here and to continue to innovate and create new value. So let's give Craig another round of applause. Of course, I'd like to thank all of you for being here and look forward to having you at the next CEO Breakfast series. A brief survey will arrive in your email shortly. If you'd like a copy of today's presentation, you'll let us know that on the survey or find Lisa Gray. Is Lisa? Where's Lisa? There she is. If you'd like a copy of today's presentation, see Lisa or let us know on the survey. And before we wrap up, I'd like to share an announcement. The Family Business Forum at St. Norbert College is launching this coming September. Prior to then, an all-day Family Business Summit will be held on campus Friday, April 3rd. The summit will focus on owners of small businesses, next-generation owners of businesses, and hot topics. More information will be shared via email later this month. We encourage you to take advantage of this great new resource in the region. And we hope to see you at our next CEO Breakfast Series on March 5th at Butamore Country Club in Appleton. Chris Hess, President and CEO of Goodwill North Central, Wisconsin, and St. Norbert College alum, will present Be the Real MVP, Focus on What Matters. Thank you for being here. Have a great day.